Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to have a new friend of mine on the show with us, Bryce Robertson. Bryce, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome, Jamie. Thanks for having me here, brother.
Absolutely. So for the listeners out there, for a little bit of context, Bryce and I met in person almost, I guess, 2 weeks ago. Probably was 2 weeks ago tonight, I think, maybe at dinner, which was in Scottsdale at a mastermind event, which was fantastic. And I know your story is very interesting. I'm excited to learn more than I already know. But for the listeners out there, Bryce, who are you and what are you up to today?
Yeah, so I'm Bryce Robertson from Cultivate Collective, where we help passive investors create financial freedom and expand their wealth through recession-resistant investments, because we believe our investments should perform well during good economic times and even better during down economic times. And our main bread and butter is mobile home parks and self-storage. We have our own in-house property management company, asset management company. We've got our own in-house construction crews. And we do a lot of heavy value add investments where we buy close to 50% occupied, move our construction crews in to do all the remodels, get the place up to 100% occupied in a really short period of time. And then we kind of move on to the next one. That's our main bread and butter. That's what we mainly do. But in recent years, we've also branched out and built relationships with top operators in other asset classes, because we only specialize in mobile home parks and self-storage. We're not going to claim to specialize in other things. So we team up with the best of the best in other asset classes so we can bring those types of investments to the table. And those kinds of investments would be along the lines of automatic teller machines, Bitcoin teller machines, Bitcoin mining. We have been involved in the multifamily space, but we're a little wary of that right now due to recession resistance. Refrigerated storage, car washes, and we're even working on the behind the scenes on some cannabis and also some mushroom investments as well.
Nice. Well, yeah, that's quite a lot you've got going on there. It sounds like you do, while you are exposed to an array of different asset classes, it sounds like you're very intentional and strategic about how you go about implementing, that your investment strategy. So I'd love to dive into that. But before we get into more detail on that, let's hop back to your backstory and touch on, potentially some more personal things here, as far as some adversity you've been through in your past, and then we'll walk back through to present day. So obviously, from adversity to abundance, just the qualifier before we really dive in. I don't pretend like, Bryce's adversity is fully over now, and now you're living in 100% abundance. That's not the intent of the show. But I think if we can dive in a little bit on some personal adversity that you've faced, whether in your literal personal life or more business related, we can pull out some lessons learned for the listeners and for ourselves, and help us when we inevitably do face hardship again, and go from there. So where would you like to take us in your journey?
Well, so first off, I want to just kind of add a little bit of color to what you just said there, because I think that's super important. One of my mentors, Dr. John DeMartini, ingrained in me the concept and philosophy that we live in a world of 50% positive and 50% negative. That's down to the most micro atom to the most macro galaxies in the universe. There's negative and positive forces pulling against and pushing against each other, and that's how our universe works, right? Now, some of us could say, well, good and bad, but that's us bringing our own personality and experiences into it. I'm just talking about positive and negative. Another way to actually look at that is, this is a realistic, I think, and healthy way to look at the world, to look at relationships, to look at business, to look at everything, really, is that we can expect, if everything's 50% positive and 50% negative, we can expect 50% reward and 50% challenge. Okay. And those who actually, it doesn't mean the challenges have to be bad. But it means our challenges are in place to help us grow in those areas. Because if we have that challenge, we haven't learned that lesson yet. And that's why it keeps showing up in our life. So I just wanted to set that context there.
That's
Now
fantastic. Yeah,
let's
really
wind back the clock, man, and go back to, I'm born and raised in Australia, and had an awesome upbringing. And I got to the near the end of high school, and I realized there is no freaking chance I am going to university and doing the rest of the schooling system, because I was bored out of my brains. I wanted to go out there. I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to earn as much money as I could. The problem is I had no influence as like business influence or entrepreneurial influences. So I didn't even really know that world existed yet. So I went out there and got what I thought that was the highest paying job, and that was in the blue collar field. So I went and got an apprenticeship as a steel fabricator welder. I did a 5-year apprenticeship in about 3 years because I was super eager to get it done. And then I went out and worked in the underground gold mines in Western Australia, where I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, 8 weeks on, 1 week off. And I kind of did that bouncing between Western Australia and Northern Territory for about 2 years, saving up a pretty decent chunk of cash, because in my early 20s, I had a vision that I wanted to travel the world for 6 years. And I did. And this is how I did it. First, I went over to London and I set up my base camp. That's where I worked and earned my money. And then I would travel from there. So I would work, 10, 12 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week, maybe for 3-4 months at a time. Then I would go travel in Europe until my money ran out. And then I would come back, I would earn more money, go traveling through Africa. And I did the whole UK, Europe, and Africa cycle for 3 years. And after that, I wanted to change the scenery. So I went from 12 million people over in London to a really small ski village in the mountains of British Columbia called Fernie, which had about 5,000 people in Canada. And I really just went there for a ski season because I wanted to experience snowboarding. And I loved it so much. And there also happened to be coal mines there as well. So I ended up starting to gig out the coal mines, and I stayed there for 2 years. And when I wasn't working out the coal mines, I was firefighting, downhill mountain biking, snowboarding, or somehow enjoying the outdoor mountainous activities. So this time during that 2 years, I really didn't travel that much. So I wasn't really spending that much money. So it enabled me to save up even bigger chunk of cash this time, so I could take an 18-month surfing and scuba diving trip down in Central and South America. And in the last 6 months of that surfing and scuba diving trip, I met my wife, who's a native from California. So naturally, I ended up here in the States, which was about 12, 13 years ago. Now, when I ended up here in the States, my wife and I made an agreement with each other. We wanted to recreate this freedom lifestyle, except we wanted to do it, one, so our money doesn't run out while we're traveling. And number two, so money's actually growing while we're traveling and having fun and living this freedom lifestyle. Now, remember, we didn't have any idea of how any of this worked. So we went out there and we started looking in the 3 main ways that we could make big bucks. And that's owning a business, the stock market, and real estate. I think the stock market category, cryptocurrency, is pretty similar to that. It just wasn't really a thing back then. So in those areas, we started doing about 7 different side hustles. We were just trying to do all these different things and see what sticks. But then after a while, I was looking at it and I was realizing, man, I'm having mediocre success. I'm spread thin, I'm spinning plates, and my energy is just all over the place. So I realized I had to stop what I was doing, take a step back, and then decide to laser focus on one thing and put all my eggs and all my energy in that basket. And that's what I did. What was I going to do? Well, I knew it was going to be real estate because at the time I had a 17-year background in construction management. But what was I going to do in real estate? Because there's so many ways to make money. So I looked at all the different ways to make money in real estate, and over and over and over again, mobile home parks kept popping off the page. Massive supply and demand in favor of mobile home park owners, getting to fulfill what I believe is the largest real estate problem in America, and that's the need for affordable housing. Awesome tax benefits, high cash flows, very little competition. I was all in. So I decided to be all in. And 3 months after making that decision, I put my first mobile home park under contract. But I wasn't in the position to get that deal closed by myself because at the time I had a negative net worth. I only had $2,000 in the bank and I had unseasoned credit because I hadn't been in the States long enough. So,
Let me jump in if you
yeah.
don't mind. This is going to be the easiest interview I've ever done because you're really good at telling your story. So I kind of didn't want to cut you off, but man, so clearly there's so many things I could pull out. Clearly, you're not afraid of hard work. You're clearly not afraid of, living life. I don't want to say to the extreme, but enjoying life through experiences. And I guess being intentional about it. You said you wanted to travel for 6 years. Let me ask, why 6 years? Why did you want to travel the world for 6 years?
I don't know how I came up with that number, but I kind of just like did a little bit of mapping in my head of how long it would take me to hit most of the countries that I wanted to hit. And I suppose I just allowed myself like 6 years to do that like properly.
Gotcha. No, it's pretty cool how you've got, you'll work hard, but you've got an intention, it seems like behind the process, if that makes sense. So you're saving up for a specific goal. And I like that. Whereas other, it's very easy for kind of the average person to get a job and, work their job and not necessarily think through it or have an experience that they're aiming for. So I love the approach. It's obviously it's different for sure than your average, at least American 9 to 5, approach. But so, sorry, there's so many questions I have. We'll have to bring you back for a second show if you can do that. But so mobile home parks, I mean, I love it. It's when I was I've been in the single family space for a while. And then as I started to look into more passive investing myself, it seemed like 3 asset classes kind of kept coming to the surface when I was doing my research years ago. And that was senior living facilities, just based on demographics for the most part. And then, of course, besides the larger multifamily, self-storage was the other one, and mobile home parks. And so self-storage and mobile home parks seem to be the most recession resistant. But then on the self-storage side, they're always adding more. So there's a supply issue there. Whereas mobile home parks, I know it's not that easy to add more. And we're getting ahead of ourselves though. So tell us about that. So you were $2,000 in the bank, negative net worth, and really didn't know what you were doing at that point. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, unseasoned credit. And
Unseasoned
also,
credit.
in addition to that, and I had unseasoned credit because I just hadn't been in the States long enough to actually build credit, right?
Sure.
And then the other thing is I'm in a brand new country. I don't know anybody, right?
Right.
So, but I leaned out to family and friends, and I'll tell you what. Originally, because I knew I had an amazing deal. It was a 40 space mobile home park with 1 single family home, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath single family home, and also a like a storage slash office slash laundry building as well. So, and the whole thing, we ended up putting on a contract for, I think it was like 570,000, which represented a 12 cap purchase in California back in 2015. And so that was just like a killer deal. I knew it was an amazing deal. I had no idea how I was going to get this deal done. I just knew what the next steps were. So the once I had it under contract, well, actually, let's actually peel it back. So to get it under contract, I knew it was an amazing deal. At the time, I'd actually spent $30,000, or it might have even been $35,000 on credit cards to pay for a mentor that was actually going to help drive me through these general processes, right? And so I didn't have a contract yet. So I wanted him to, 1, quickly look at the deal, and number 2, give me the contract I needed to put it on the contract. So I called him up, no answer. I kept calling, no answer. I'm like, man, if I don't get contact with him very soon, this deal's not happening, because like it's gonna sell like hotcakes at this price. So I knew I had to move quickly. So I called the organization and said, hey, my mentor is not like calling me back. What's the deal? I'm trying to get this deal done. So he finally called me back and he says, all right, tell me about the deal, kiddo. And so I tell him about the deal. It's a 12 cap in California, 40 space park, blah, blah, blah. He's like, cool, deal sounds good. Checks out. He's like, okay, what do you need help with? And I said, well, I'm in a little bit of a situation. I have a negative net worth, $2,000 bank, an unseasoned credit, and I have no contract. And he's like, run that by me again. I told him negative net worth, $2,000, unseasoned credit. And this is what he said. He said, you're dreaming, kiddo. You're never going to get it done. Just come back down to the club and do a little single family deal like everybody else. You're way out of your league. So what do you think I did? I took the phone and I just hung up, man. That was not the energy I was looking for. That was not the answer I was looking for. I can no longer rely on that dude. So I went and actually made another phone call to somebody who has had success in the mobile home park space. I called him up. I told him, hey, here's the deal. Here's the stats. He's like, what? A 12 cap in California? Why do you not have that under contract? I said, well, because I don't have a contract. He's like, dude, I'm going to email you one right now. Put that thing under contract. So boom, got the contract, put it on the contract. We were sweet. Next thing I need to do was perform some due diligence on it to make sure that we were actually buying what we thought we were buying and to evaluate all the risks. So cool, got through that piece. And then the next piece is like, uh-oh, we need money. We need to get this deal done and we need financing. And I currently don't qualify for financing because I've got unseasoned credit. So we leaned out to family and friends. And I thought, I've got a cracking deal. This is going to be a piece of cake. Everybody wants in on a good deal. The thing is, I didn't realize at the time is like, I have no experience. All of a sudden, I'm this real estate investor. People don't know me as a real estate investor. I haven't prepared anybody for it. And I had a really cold shower. Like really, I had not much responses at all. Now, finally, we actually did have some family and friends join, but it was really because of my wife, because of the relationships that my wife had built over the years. And their trust in my wife and their trust in my wife's decision on me was really why these people invested in the first place. And so then also got a little bit creative, and the sellers had someone who had like a financing note tied to the park. It was very, very small. And I just reached out to the sellers and I said, hey, does that person like being involved in the deal? They said, yeah, they've been involved in the deal for 10 years and they love it. I'm like, would it be cool if I called them? The sellers are like, why do you want to call them? I said, well, I just want to see if they're interested in staying in the deal, maybe for a larger portion. So we called him up and sure thing. Guy was like super loved being in the deal for the last 10 years. He had more money at the time. He wanted to place into investment. So he gave us some seller financing not seller finance. He gave us some third-party financing through a retirement account. So that we could get the deal done. So 3 months after putting it under contract, we solved all these problems, and then we got the deal done.
That is awesome. It's a lot of moving parts there, and I love the fact that you didn't give up. And you obviously knew it was a good deal, or else, I mean, because it could have gone poorly if it wasn't a good deal. But so this guy offered you, he offered you creative financing, or that was already in place, but you've got your debt side there, and then the funds that you raised through your wife's contacts were the equity portion. But
yeah, I think we needed about like 170, 180 grand to basically pay for the down payment of the loan and the closing costs.
Got it. Okay. So how much of your own personal money did you have into this deal?
So started off with 2 grand, but then as we were progressing through the due diligence and inspections period, I was earning more money. And by the time we were said and done and closed, I ended up putting 15 grand into that deal.
Got it. So that's a lot of, I mean, that deal itself highlights a lot of adversity, I think, that you overcame. I'm sure you've had other periods of adversity, personal adversity and things, but what would you say kind of stands out with regard to, some of the negative, or I guess more mental challenges, maybe, when you were going through that first deal?
Oh, dude, it was just like, there was so many reasons why that deal seemed like it wasn't going to work. Like my mentor was like, yeah, it's just not happening, dude. You're not doing this deal. It's too big. Right. That would have taken a lot of people out. You pay somebody that much money for mentoring. A lot of people would have listened to that. There was just no room in my way of thinking for that kind of mentality. But then, you know, going through trying to get the financing piece, like we had no idea how we're going to do that. Having all of these challenges with the capital raising, getting to a point where it looks like we're not even going to raise the capital for this deal. And then we get near closing. So one of the other challenges that we had was that the sellers were actually going through a separation. See, the sellers were an intimate couple. They had some children together. I don't think they were married, but this was literally the last thing that was keeping them together. Once this tie was split with this mobile home park, there was no reason for him to have to talk to her, and she didn't want to be with him anymore, right? But he still wanted something. So because of that, right at the last minute, he started to get a little crazy in the way he was communicating. And then he got so aggressive, he got to the point where he said, hey, screw you guys. We're not closing on this deal. Force me if you can. I'm going to Mexico. Now, let me also set the context on this, because before this, in the beginning, before we even put it under contract, he literally would not put it under contract unless I signed a disclosure saying that I do not work for the IRS, nor do I work for the FBI. So that's an interesting thing to come into due diligence on that. Obviously gave us 2 data points that we had to look into, but he was so paranoid that he wouldn't like even put the deal under contract until I stated in writing that I wasn't part of the FBI or the IRS. So this was accurate. And so he's like, all right, we're going to Mexico. I'm out. It's done. You're not doing the deal. It's not happening. Catch me if you can. Literally, he was like, catch me if you can. And then, so then the title company actually called him up, and the title company said, well, hey, you can do that. We can't force you to do anything, but let's just like have you talk to our legal department before you actually go to Mexico. Okay. And because there's some pretty big consequences if you go down to Mexico. And so he talked to the legal department, and then like literally the next day we closed because he realized he was in a lot of trouble and he already didn't want to be in trouble. So yeah, so we ended up getting that deal done.
That is wild. Yeah, we the house we own now, our primary residence, we bought from a couple who was splitting up, and it got pretty dicey, and it did delay the closing quite a bit with you know, a lot of personal issues there that kind of came to fruition. So I can only imagine on a larger scale, you're buying a mobile home park and this guy's trying to flee the country. That is wild. So what was going through your head? I mean, were the people around you, your wife, I mean, were people saying you need to stop? Besides your mentor, were others trying to dissuade you from moving forward?
My wife was definitely of the same mindset. She's like, yeah, we're getting this deal done. We're gonna do it. What do we have to do to get this deal done? Obviously within our values and morals, but like we really wanted to get the deal done. Probably most other people were just like, this dude's crazy. Like, I don't know if we really had much support anywhere else. You know, it was just like, it was just self-determination, man.
Got it.
And really what drove me, and that's an interesting thing to talk about.
That was my next question. Exactly. Yep.
Because there's kind of 2 things that motivate us. There's like the magnetic attraction to something that we want that pulls us towards what we want. And then there's the repelling of moving away from something we didn't want. And I hadn't set the context that for the 17 years that I worked in the construction industry, I was dissatisfied. I was unhealthy. I didn't enjoy it. I was overworked. I was burnt out. I literally reached a point. I don't even like to use this H word because I just don't think it's good to put out there, but I hated like working, and I hated that job, and I really needed to just get away from that. Real estate was this thing that I'd seen success stories from other people, and I had a glimmering hope of possibility that I could live a different life. And so I was willing to make that happen, and I was willing to put in the work and do what I had to do to make and solve all the problems to make that happen. So the thing that really, really drove me, and this drove me all the way up until financial freedom, because after we closed on that park, 2.5 years later, for the next 2.5 years, we rinsed and repeated this syndication model of raising capital for mobile home parks and doing more deals. And then 2.5 years later, became financially free, retired ourselves, never had to work again, work because we choose to, not because we have to. But the motivating factor that drove me to that point was to really get away from the career that I felt like I just dug myself into a hole. And until I came across real estate investing, I literally thought that if I'm going to go out and change and create an alternative, it's going to take me another 17 years to get to that point in that career. And that is so not the case. That was my negative mindset working for me and my lack of awareness and consciousness. But I was really moving away from the flame that was burning my butt, which was just a job. I was miserable, dude. Like I was
Yeah.
honestly like miserable.
No, that's interesting because I don't know, as you were talking through the element that's pulling you forward and the element that's pushing you away is was thinking of your positive and negative energy that you talked about in the beginning. It's essentially a great example of that positive and negative both coexisting, if you will. So yeah, that's awesome. So now you've been doing this for several years up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, the first deal was back in 2015, so we're 7 years deep.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're actively syndicating now and looking for deals. Like what does a week look like for you with regard to real estate investing?
Every week's different. I ebb and flow. I live by the freedom trinity of financial time and location freedom. So I'm in the position where I literally can do what I want from where I want, when I want, with who I want. Now, just because I'm in that position doesn't mean that I'm like sitting in the Bahamas sipping on cocktails like all day long, because that gets boring. I've done that. Sure. I travel a lot. I've traveled all over the world. I still do all of that. But I like a balance of like growing entrepreneurially, growing business, helping a lot of people, and then also having time for me and having the downtime and traveling and all of that. So I kind of like ebb and flow between business growth and not. So right now I'm kind of winding down. I've been in massive business growth mode for the last like probably 6 months. We've done a lot of deals this year. I think we're just about to wrap up 12 mobile home park purchases. We've got 5 under contract right now. And wow. We've really been moving and shaking. We've been doing a whole bunch of other deals. We've got a Bitcoin mining fund coming out in like 2 weeks. Bitcoin telemachines coming out about 4 weeks after that. There's a handful of other deals that we'll probably do before year's end. So there is no like typical week for me. My life is just kind of like all over the place, and I put my energy where I need to. Recently, it's been into rebranding, growing the business, putting a lot of automated systems in place. And I'm just kind of like winding down a little bit here too, as we go to the year's end, so I can just like chill out and kind of get a little bit more balance, which is a challenge that I actually have, Jamie. It's like, it's interesting to try and find where that perfect balance is. Because people say, look, if you look at life, and I like to look at life in 5 core areas: wealth, health, relationships, spirituality, and having fun. And it's my belief that if we have a good balance and growth in all of those 5 areas, that we're generally going to be pretty fulfilled. It's usually when we're out of balance of those areas that we find that we're unfulfilled. And for example, someone who's like super awesome at going to the gym, but then they've got no money and no relationships, and they're not spiritually grounded, and they're not really having that much fun. Is that really quality of life? No, it's not. No. And there is no one size fits all answer for any of us, because we're all different. Sure. And so I've been going through the process. One of the challenges I've been dealing with lately has been finding that sweet spot, and I've been finding if I go more than 3 months of like massive growth as an entrepreneur, I start to like want to get some more time off. And if I have time off for like 3-4 months at a time, I'm like itching for like entrepreneurial growth. So I don't know if there's a perfect answer to it. I think if someone says, hey man, I'm perfectly balanced, I think maybe temporarily we experience that, but it's very short-lived. And then, we've got work to do to kind of put it back in balance.
Absolutely. And I can entirely relate to that. It's for my own business, when we met 2 weeks ago in Scottsdale, I should have been, for my business short term, I should have been at a note conference in California. But what was actually much better for me personally and for my family and my health was going to the mastermind event that I went to, because I was getting a little bit too, into the weeds on my own business growth, and it's unhealthy after a bit of time. But I'm with you too. The other extreme, I don't ever picture, quote unquote, retiring, just fully retiring on a beach somewhere. I mean, I think growth and serving others and serving yourself and just getting better and improving and is an important facet of mental health. And just it all relates together. So it all ties in together. That's a good point. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty awesome. Just your growth in the last 7 years from a business standpoint is pretty phenomenal. And a ton of people would have quit at several different points during what you went through, for sure. And I do want the listeners to understand that you just said you could be doing whatever you want, whenever you want, but you are choosing to be on our podcast right now. No, I'm just joking. But so I'm going to fly through some quick questions here and see where it takes us. What's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
That misunderstand about me? That's a really good question. Something that people misunderstand. Well, probably one of the things in business, maybe in business, right? People may misunderstand that I care, maybe, because if you look at like disc profiles and you look at like what my personality type is, I'm super strong on dominance and influence. And I'm relatively low on stability, and I think the C is like conscientiousness of others or something like that. But the main thing that actually drives me to even do any of this at all is to help people create freedom in their life and to help people on my team become financially free and expand their wealth and create more freedom in their life. So number one, they can actually start making decisions from their heart and the soul, not from necessity. And then the more finances, the better they get in the financial world, the more that they can go out there and spread their seed positively in the world. So that's actually what drives me. And but when we're in the thick of it and in the weeds, especially if you're working very closely with me, I'm cracking the whip, man. And I'm like pretty aggressive. I'm like, go, 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 push, push, push. And maybe I don't spend enough time kind of like, smelling the flowers and showing appreciation. I certainly do it a lot more these days. But that's kind of my way of actually giving love and helping people out here on the planet.
Got it. No, it makes a lot of sense. What would you say is one of your biggest failures or setbacks or challenges, however you want to frame it, besides what we've already talked about?
I don't believe in failures. I know you've heard me say that before.
Yeah,
I think that every challenge is an opportunity for us to grow, and it keeps popping up because we haven't learned that lesson yet. I could talk about like failures in business and everything like that. I could talk about like different parks and investments where I've had failures, but I think one of the areas that I haven't really spoken about them much, or really much in public at all, is that I wasn't like strong at reading and writing in school, right? And literally by the time that I dropped out of high school, and it was like year 11 when I dropped out, I'd read one book, man. I read one book, and it was like way years earlier. So then remember when I left school, I got into the blue collar trades, and all I had to do was read drawings. I didn't have to read words, So like I had terrible vocabulary. I was a bit of like a ghetto Australian slang guy, right? And then I also just didn't have a need or desire to read much until I was like 30 years old, or like just before 30, maybe in my late 20s. And I actually was 27 or 28 when I learned Spanish, because I knew I was going down to Central and South America, that I actually had to look again at, English and grammar and all of this, because at that point, when I was like 27, 28 years old, all I could do is just scrape together sending an email. And think about this, like fast forward in business, like you have to be a good communicator. You have to have an excellent vocabulary. You have to be able to like write. You have to be able to present a message clearly. And, so I had to, and then also I came to America, and I didn't realize when I came to America how much I needed to change my vocabulary, because I started telling jokes when I got over here, and I got to the punchline, and I'm like, I'm ready for everybody to just start like crying out in laughter. People just looking at me going, Bryce, I've got no idea what you're talking about, dude.
That was because of your vocabulary, or because
it's because I used so much. I had so much slang that people weren't familiar with.
Gotcha.
because the Australian culture uses a lot of slang, and the slang
Hmm.
moves really quickly. Like the words move really, they
Yeah.
change all the time frequently. And so it's a very different way to speak. And then I realized in the business world here, especially, it's like I had to go back and relearn the entire English
Hmm.
concept, the English
Yeah.
language, right? And then I had to learn how grammar and how to like write properly and how to write emails. And then, I went on to, be a best-selling author. And now it's actually one of my strengths, but I had to turn that weakness into a strength in order to be able to do business in the first place. And that's
Hmm.
just something I've never really talked about much.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's it's something, many of us just take for granted, because we learned it in school or whatever. But so was it more, just to dive in slightly more on that, was it more, it was more challenging for you to learn than it was for others? Or do you think it was just you didn't want to learn it because you didn't see a need for it at that time?
I was freaking bored, man. It just used to bore me, dude. In
Hmm.
school, I didn't enjoy it. Like for some reason, I liked math and science. I don't know, and I ended up being
Yeah.
pretty decent at that. And I suppose I scraped by with grades. I don't even know how, looking back with English, but
Hmm.
it just bored me. And I
Yeah.
probably at the time I was just thinking, well, I'm just doing adventurous stuff anyway, so I don't need to
Right.
read and write. Um, and maybe I wasn't good at it or something, and maybe I kind of just like tapped myself out. I don't know what I did,
Yeah.
but I just wasn't interested.
Gotcha.
Now I love it, dude. Now I read all the time. Now I kind of pride myself in like, writing awesome articles. I write for Bigger Pockets. I've got another book that I'm writing right now called The Freedom Trinity that's probably going to launch next year.
Nice.
Um, but
That's
there's everybody's got something, man. That was my
sure.
thing. We've got things that we need to, because really becoming financially free, becoming financially successful, it's not about like when you have money, the money is going to solve your problems. That's not
Right.
really the most important thing. It's the journey of like who we have to become. And then when we get to that point, who we have become, to be the person we needed to be to achieve those achievements. It's really more about self-development than it is of anything else.
Hmm. That's really good. Yeah, I was curious if your how your views on money maybe had changed over the years. Anything you can say there? Like if you were, how does your when you were an 18-year-old versus today, what was your view of money back then versus what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, so like I always had a desire to go out and like earn money to get what I wanted. And so like I think I did a pretty good job at doing that, of
Hmm.
going out and saying, "Hey, I want this, so I know that I can go out and earn money to do that." But what I
Hmm.
didn't know at the time is that like that's a never-ending way. You're just going to keep going down that rabbit hole. And now I have a completely different way of doing it. Now I'll go create an investment. It's going to create cash flow to pay for something, which is very different from like, I'm going to work X amount of hours and save up money so I can go get this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
really, I had to go through a whole reprogramming. My first main mentor was T. Harvecker, and
Hmm.
I read his book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind.
Hmm.
And then we ended up going on. My wife and I did like 2-3 years training with his organization, Peak
Wow.
Potentials, and we went through. One of the first things is we went through visual, audio and kinesthetic reprogramming of all of our negative financial mindset. Because what I
Hmm.
didn't know at the time is all of these experiences I'd had and all the people that I'd been around are all inflicting negative financial concepts on us. Things that we've heard, like you have to earn money to make money. Sorry,
Hmm.
you have to make money to earn money.
Yeah.
Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is the
Right.
root of all evil. All these things, they're all
Right.
nonsense. We can shoot holes in them. I've actually since then created a course called Financial Freedom Mastery, where we go through a similar process and we actually reprogram ourselves and learn a lot more about financial freedom as well. And it's literally the place that we need to start, because the reason that more people aren't successful, number
Hmm.
one, the reason
Hmm.
financially successful or financially free, the number one reason is because people don't believe that it's possible for them. And that's huge. So we've got to
Yes,
start
that's
with our
massive.
mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is huge. That's awesome. Um, yeah, that's I either to me, either extreme is terrible. I mean, you don't want to be, a slave to money your whole life. Obviously, you've made the decision to experience life and kind of put money in its place and have money serve you. But the other extreme is not good either, where you just bury your head in the sand and pretend money has zero impact or zero significance. So I love what I view as a healthy take on the importance of money. So that's really good.
And then we can go too far the other way too, Jamie. And we could
Yeah,
be like, obsessed with money and thinking that like money's going to solve all of our problems. And like, can't I just buy
absolutely.
a solution to the problem? And, it's in certain places like intimate relationships. It's like money's not going to necessarily solve that problem. Money
Sure.
makes our life easier. It makes our life better. It helps expand things in other areas. But, we can go too far the other way as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Um, all right, as we move toward the conclusion here, a few more rapid fire questions. If
Okay.
you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
So I'd have tea because I don't drink coffee.
Okay, T. Let's do that.
With any historical figure.
Could be, historical or alive today. Anybody.
Just one person, man. That hurts, dude. There's so much because there's so many people, but for some reason right now, Bob Marley's coming up. I mean, that
Okay.
dude is just a freedom advocate. He just created such a massive platform that still resonates today. I actually like reggae music. I like listening to a lot of his sons as well too. And I actually just went to a few of their concerts recently. I went to Stephen Marley and Ziggy Marley. Those guys have a message coming from like Bob being an evangelist of freedom, have a message of freedom that came out in like the 60s and 70s. That's like totally applicable to all of the things that are happening in the world today. So I think it'd be amazing to like sit down and have a conversation with Bob Marley, man.
That's awesome. I'm guessing you might have more than tea too, but just all right. If you were given $20 million tomorrow, what would you do with it?
Dude, I'd invest it in the recession resistant investments that we bring to the table, bro, because that's what I believe in. That's the difference that we can make, man. It's I'm out there like helping as many investors as I can create financial freedom and expand their wealth so that they can live free, make decisions from their heart and soul, go out and spread their seed, be financially backed to make the difference in the world that they want to. So yeah, that's what I do, man.
That's awesome. I love it. So before we wrap up here, talk a little bit more about kind of, your book coming out or any recent, deals you have going on. What's going on today in your business?
Yeah, we've got a lot going on, man. Yeah, the Freedom Trinity, that'll probably be coming out next year. It's in the very, very early stages of the works here. The Freedom Trinity is financial, time, and location freedom. Collectively, when we live that together, we have true freedom in the material world in our life. I think spiritual, psychological, and health freedom is so important as well. That's a little bit of a different topic. Yeah, financial freedom mastery, that's actually something we've been putting a lot of energy into recently. That's where we're literally teaching people what our system has failed to teach us. I believe our system is created to create employees and cogs in the wheel to fulfill their dreams, not actually our dreams. And so I'm really dedicated to helping people create financial freedom. And so basically what I've done is I've taken 10 years of experience, hundreds of thousands of dollars of self-education and millions of dollars of like invested capital, risk capital put out there to prove the philosophies and concepts and principles that we actually teach in financial freedom mastery. And we teach that over a 2-day period. We do it live. We also do it in a virtual setting as well. And the course is literally designed that through 14 freedom exercises, each of the participants literally create their own custom designed financial freedom strategy and plan based off their own specific needs, desires, and circumstances, because none of us are created equal or in the same position. And so that's really exciting. And if anyone's interested in finding out more about that, go to freedomtrinity.com. And
Awesome.
really, we're just like going to bring as many recession resistant investments that we can to the table. We're just going to
Yeah,
keep going and keep expanding our smorgasbord of recession resistant investments and serving our inner circle.
love it. Do you, when you raise capital or and look for investors, is it accredited only, or do you work with non-accredited investors as well?
We work with both. Some of our investments allow both accredited and non-accredited, and some
Hmm.
of them are for accredited only, but we
Gotcha.
definitely accommodate both.
Awesome. That's really cool in this course too, because it's, I think, one of the main problems with, specifically public education as far as finance goes is, well, for one, it may not be, the teacher may not be the person who should be kind of giving out this financial education. No offense to public school teachers. My mom was one for many years. Um, and two, it has to be catered, like you just said, it has to be catered to the individual. So it's not a one size fits all, solution.
Yeah, there's
So
too many one size fits all things out there, even with health and relationships and everything. And it's just the world just doesn't work like that. And
yeah.
you hit it on the head, man. Like no one wants a fat fitness instructor. So if you're going to learn to be financially successful, you want to learn by somebody who's like way ahead of where you are.
Absolutely. I love it. Man, Bryce, I definitely need to re-listen to this one. This has been fantastic. You have any more quick gold nuggets you want to drop before we sign off here?
I would just say, like, guys, it's never been more important to take care of ourselves financially, where we're on the precipice of like big historical events to happen economically. I know we didn't really like break into that much today, but some really interesting times are coming, to say the least. I think it's going to be in a time where there's going to be a lot of people in need, and there's going to be a lot of people positioned to be able to help as well. I know I'll be on the helping side of that. So I would just say, like, expand your awareness of what's happening around you and what's coming in the near future. It's my belief that we're going to experience some pretty hardcore like economic downturns, potentially some of the biggest that we've ever seen in our life. So the time has never been more important. We are in the 11th hour to take action on this. It's not too late to get going on it, but it's time to take action now and start taking control of our freedom in all areas of our life. And the financial piece is a good place to start.
Absolutely. I love it. That was really well said, Bryce. Where can our listeners find you online? I know you've already mentioned it, but go ahead and plug it again if you would.
Yeah. So, if you want to just find out about investments, more about us, go to investcultivate.com, and we spell cultivate with the number 8. So that's invest, CULTIV, the number 8.com. And if you're looking to find out more about financial freedom mastery, go to freedomtrinity.com.
Fantastic, Bryce. Bryce Robertson, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fantastic. And for our listeners out there, thank you for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time as well. Take care, everyone.